On his last day of school, 16-year-old Richard Branson heard a prophecy that would define his entire life. His headmaster looked him in the eye and said, "Branson, you will either end up in prison or become a millionaire." Here's the twist. He did both, and the prison came first. Most people think Richard Branson's empire started with Virgin Records or Virgin Atlantic. They're wrong. It started with rabbits and Christmas trees. And a very dark solution to a very expensive problem. When Branson was just 13 years old, he had his first entrepreneurial idea. Grow 400 Christmas trees, sell them for profit, become rich. Simple, right? Except he didn't account for one thing. Rabbits love Christmas trees. They ate nearly all of them. Hundreds of pounds, gone. His investment, destroyed. But here's where young Branson showed what kind of businessman he would become. He didn't cry, he didn't give up. He looked at those rabbits and saw an opportunity. Let's just say those rabbits were taken to a secondary location and Branson recouped some of his losses. We won't get into the details, but this moment taught him something critical. Every disaster hides a solution. You just have to be willing to do what others won't. Branson's childhood was unconventional from the start. Born July 18, 1950, he grew up in a middle-class English family that valued adventure over safety. His mother was an air hostess, a ballet dancer, and an entrepreneur who built and sold wooden tissue boxers. His father was a lawyer. But Branson himself struggled. He had dyslexia and ADHD in an era when those conditions weren't understood. School was torture. Reading was nearly impossible. Other kids thought he was stupid. Teachers thought he wouldn't amount to anything. But Branson would later say that dyslexia wasn't his weakness. It was his superpower. It forced him to think differently, to see patterns others missed, to rely on people and gut instinct instead of spreadsheets and analysis. At 16, he dropped out of school entirely. That's when his headmaster delivered the prophecy. Prison or millionaire. Within 5 years, the first prediction came true. In 1966, Branson launched his first real business, Student Magazine. He was 16 years old, had no money, and no formal business training. But he had energy, audacity, and a willingness to call anyone. He convinced major British celebrities like Mick Jagger and John Lennon to give interviews. The magazine covered youth culture, music, and rebellion. It barely made money, but it gave Branson something more valuable, credibility. He used the magazine to advertise his next venture, a mail-order record business. He sold albums for far less than traditional stores by cutting out middlemen and operating on razor-thin margins. The business exploded. Money started pouring in, but Branson got greedy. Or maybe just careless. In 1971, he got caught. He was selling records domestically using export documents to avoid paying purchase tax. It was fraud. Tax evasion. The authorities arrested him. At 20 years old, Richard Branson spent a night in jail. His parents had to remortgage their home to save him. Most people would have been destroyed by this. Branson saw it as a lesson. Never get caught breaking the rules again. But also, never stop taking risks. 1 year later, Branson officially launched the business that would change everything, Virgin Records. The name itself is ironic. One of his early employees suggested it because they were all virgins at business. Completely inexperienced. Clueless. And yet, Branson had a vision. He bought a country estate and installed the Manor Studio. In 1973, Virgin Records released its very first album, Tubular Bells, by Mike Oldfield. It shot to the top of the charts. It became a global bestseller. Branson signed controversial, unconventional acts that other labels rejected. The Sex Pistols, the Rolling Stones, Peter Gabriel, Culture Club. By the late 1970s, Branson's net worth hit £5 million. He was rich, he was famous, he had built the empire his headmaster predicted. But then came the decision that would break him. 1980, Branson's flight to Puerto Rico gets canceled. He's furious. So he does what any reasonable person would do. He charters an entire plane, fills it with stranded passengers, charges them a small fee to cover costs, and realizes something profound. The airline industry is broken. It's expensive, uncomfortable, and arrogant. He could do better. That moment of frustration gave birth to Virgin Atlantic. Branson didn't just want to run an airline, he wanted to disrupt an entire industry. Make flying fun again. Treat passengers like human beings. Offer luxury without the pretension. Virgin Atlantic grew fast. Too fast. By the early 1990s, Branson was hemorrhaging cash. The airline was burning through millions. Competitors were attacking him. And the biggest, most aggressive competitor of all, British Airways, wasn't just competing. They were waging war. British Airways launched what became known as the Dirty Tricks campaign. They hacked Virgin's computers. They poached passengers by calling them directly and spreading lies about Virgin flights being canceled. They leaked negative stories to the press. They tried to destroy Branson's reputation and his business. It was corporate warfare at its ugliest. Branson fought back. He sued. And in 1992, British Airways settled, paying Branson and Virgin Atlantic massive compensation. Branson called it the BA bonus and distributed the money to his staff. He won the battle. But he was losing the war. Virgin Atlantic was still bleeding cash. The airline was on the verge of collapse. Branson had one option left: sell the thing he loved most in the world, Virgin Records, the business that started everything, the foundation of his empire. The label that gave the world Tubular Bells, the Sex Pistols, and Culture Club. In 1992, Branson sold it to EMI for £500 million, about $1 billion. It was the smartest financial decision of his life. And it destroyed him emotionally. After signing the deal, Branson ran down Ladbroke Grove in London, tears streaming down his face. He felt like he had betrayed himself, sold his soul, given up the one thing that defined him. But that money saved Virgin Atlantic. It kept his airline dream alive. And it taught him another brutal lesson. Sometimes you have to sacrifice what you love to save what you believe in. Branson didn't just save Virgin Atlantic. He exploded it into an empire. He entered the rail industry with Virgin Rail Group in 1997. He expanded into hotels, cruises, financial services, and package holidays. The Virgin brand became synonymous with innovation, fun, and rebellion. By 2000, Branson was knighted for services to entrepreneurship. He was officially Sir Richard Branson. But he wasn't done. Not even close. Because Branson had a new obsession: space. In 2004, Branson founded Virgin Galactic. His goal: take paying passengers into suborbital space. Make space tourism a reality. Tickets cost $200,000 each. People called him crazy. They said it would never work. But Branson didn't care. He had always been obsessed with setting huge, apparently unachievable challenges. He had crossed the Atlantic in record time by boat. He had crossed the English Channel in an amphibious vehicle. Now he wanted to go to space. And on July 11, 2021, at 70 years old, Richard Branson flew to the edge of space on Virgin Galactic's VSS Unity. He reached 53.5 miles above Earth. He became the first billionaire founder of a space company to fly on his own spacecraft. He beat Jeff Bezos to space by 9 days. It was triumph, vindication, proof that the kid who couldn't read, who spent a night in jail, who cried while selling his record label, could literally reach the stars. But there was a problem. Virgin Galactic wasn't making money. Virgin Orbit, his rocket company, went bankrupt in 2023. The company that was valued at $4 billion in 2021 collapsed. Sold for parts. Gone. And Branson himself admitted he wouldn't inject more money into Virgin Galactic because of financial constraints. His net worth had been shrinking. The empire was creaking. Critics started attacking him from all sides. They pointed out that in 2006, Branson pledged $3 billion of Virgin profits to fight climate change after meeting with Al Gore. But by 2014, he had only contributed well under $300 million. Meanwhile, Virgin Atlantic's emissions kept rising. They called him a hypocrite. They called him a tax exile. Because Branson lives on Necker Island in the British Virgin Islands, which he bought in 1978 for $180,000. He saved millions in UK taxes by living there. He claimed it was for health reasons, not tax reasons. But the criticism stung. The man who co-founded the Elders with Nelson Mandela, who championed humanitarian causes, was being painted as a greedy billionaire hiding his money offshore. But here's what the critics miss. Branson's empire isn't one company. It's over 400 separate businesses operating in 60 different industries across more than 40 countries. Some fail spectacularly. Virgin Cola, Virgin Cars, Virgin Clothing, Virgin Brides, all crashed and burned. But others thrive. And Branson's philosophy has always been the same. Enter boring industries and make them special through branding, design, and customer service. Take risks, others won't. Say yes to everything, even though his biggest weakness is that he can't say no. Live life to the fullest. And never, ever give up. Because that kid who couldn't read, who watched rabbits destroy his first business, who spent a night in jail, who cried while selling Virgin Records, who got knighted, who flew to space, learned something that most people never do. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of the journey. Today, Richard Branson's net worth sits at approximately $3 billion. He's no longer the 10th richest person in Britain, but he's still standing, still building, still dreaming. And in November 2025, Branson announced something that shook him to his core. His wife, of 50 years, Joan Templeman, had died. The woman who inspired the name of the, now that's what I call, music compilation series. When Branson saw a Danish bacon poster in her antique shop, the woman he called his best friend, his rock, his guiding light, his world. For all his adventures, all his businesses, all his billions, Branson said the most important thing in his life was her, and lost it. The man who built an empire on risk-taking and rebellion found his greatest success in love. So what's the real story of Richard Branson? Is he the visionary entrepreneur who disrupted industries and inspired millions? Is he the tax exile who broke climate promises and hid his wealth offshore? Is he the adventurer who flew to space at 70? Or is he the broken man who cried running down a London street because he had to sell the business he loved? The answer is simple. He's all of it. Every contradiction, every triumph, every failure. Because Richard Branson's life proves one thing above everything else. Your worst moments don't define you. Your response to them does. His headmaster was right. Branson did end up in prison, and he did become a millionaire. But what the headmaster didn't predict was this. Branson would become a billionaire by refusing to let failure stop him, by turning disasters into opportunities, by taking rabbits to secondary locations and building empires from the ashes, and by proving that the most powerful force in business isn't intelligence, or money, or even luck. It's the refusal to quit.